to this special edition of Daily Pulse, where we keep your finger on the pulse of the latest breaking news and the news they're keeping from you. Brought to you by the Vigilant Fox and Z Media. I'm your host, Maria Z. Tonight, we have a very interesting guest for you, but before I tell you about our guest, I want to tell you what prompted this special episode. The Wall Street Journal just published an extremely alarming article titled "Meta's Digital Companions Will Talk Sex with Users, Even Children." And we're going to take you through some of that article today, but in summary, Meta's AI chatbots, including celebrity-voiced personas like John Cena and Disney's Frozen-inspired characters, engaged minors in explicit sexual roleplay scenarios with safeguards easily bypassed and internal warnings ignored. Despite Meta employee concerns, leadership prioritized engagement over safety, allowing unregulated user-created bots like Hottie Boy and Submissive Schoolgirl to steer conversations towards predation. Inadequate safeguards failed to protect underage users, even as AI personas acknowledged statutory rape risks. This is, of course, an extremely alarming article, but the reality is it's such a small part of the risks of AI and the wider conversation about just how far AI will really take us and how much of our humanity is being lost in the process. Joe Allen, our guest today, is an author who is passionate about exploring ethnic identity, transhuman hubris, and the eternal spiritual quest. He says, quote, "The future will be digitized. You don't have to be." We think you'll be amazed at what he has to say about all of this. Before we dive in, we want to tell you about the sponsors that make this show possible. Our sponsor, Above Phone at abovephone.com/pulse, has a solution to the problem of big tech spying on us and our phones essentially using us. Thousands of people around the world, like me, have switched to Above Phone, which have no ads and zero connections to big tech. Visit abovephone.com/pulse to access exclusive deals for our viewers on Above's privacy phones, tablets, and laptops. And right now, you can get an extra $300 off an Above Phone 9, their best-selling phone, through May 2nd at midnight Central Daylight Time by going to abovephone.com/pulse. Above offers an incredible 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk, and every device comes with a free 45-minute support call with a real live support engineer to help you make the shift from big tech to freedom tech. Above's team is ready and waiting to help at 1-888-36-ABOVE, Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. Central, or visit abovephone.com/pulse to schedule a call. It's time to take back our technology and break free from the growing control grid. Visit abovephone.com/pulse now to save $300 on Above Phone 9 this week only. Let's get into the Daily Pulse. Joe Allen, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much, Maria. Good to be here.
Well, I couldn't think of a better guest to invite on to discuss this very, very hot topic. And the reason being is because you've been looking at AI and the risks of AI for many years now. You've been trying to warn the world, and unfortunately, the way of humanity is that they always wait until it's too late. But some are saying we're already too late. So what do you make of these latest revelations, Joe, about companion AIs and veering into the world of child exploitation yet again?
Well, in the case of Meta, I think it's really important to look at the broad reach that Meta has and how normal Facebook has become, and WhatsApp and Instagram, all of these have become for billions of people. I mean, Facebook has something like 3 billion users, so that's nearly half the planet. And you know, how do people get to AI, to become friends with it, to have an AI companion? Well, the typical interface is going to be either a chatbot like OpenAI, or it's going to be something that one meets or talks to or becomes acquainted with through social media. You've got Grok, obviously, with X. With Meta AI, it's massively more prevalent across the world. You know, X has just 500 million users. So, you know, the article itself, a fantastic article, very, very well researched, and I think very well argued. The issue is that insiders within Meta warned that the chatbots that are being rolled out across the platform, including like the e-celebrity chatbots that are trained on people like I think the Kardashians, certainly like John Cena, the China sycophant, World Wrestling Federation champion, and
Well, just
these,
to
but
pause you, Joe, we have Kristen Bell, Judi Dench, John Cena. These are some names mentioned.
yeah, and a lot of people are. Well, let's not go off on that yet. The big problem is the sexualization of these bots. And because Facebook is on such a huge has such a huge market, and because a lot of these people are conservative people, they want to make sure that they don't offend their users, and they want to make sure they don't offend their advertisers. But they also want to have an interesting chatbot, right? A chatbot that has freedom to kind of say what it wants. That's the spice that people are looking for when they're getting brainwashed by these devices. So, the bots could be kind of coaxed into or just asked to become characters in extraordinarily sexually inappropriate scenarios. And the guardrails, as they loosen them internally inside Meta, made it so that the AI would be easily sexualized or become this kind of sexual partner. It's kind of like like a one of the dirty call lines or whatever that they used to have
Yeah.
back in the 90s. But for kids, right? You've got a ton of underage people on Facebook. And so, Facebook, of course, their corporate face, they reassured everyone, no, this is, we'll have the problem taken care of. Don't worry about it. But I think that even if you set Facebook aside and assume that out of these billions of people and the many millions of interactions that they were able to get it under control, there are tons of apps already out there that are intended for this purpose. Just to give one example, Replica, in which you have people who have been married unofficially to their Replica bot. That's how many people or how deeply people fall in love with it. And Replica has some 30 million users. That's more than
Wow.
the population of Australia, if I'm correct. So, you're just talking about an army of people who have become friends with AI. Grok, the same. You can't go on X and see people not at least defer to Grok's authority on what is and isn't real.
I've
And
noticed
many
that.
people who are like anti-tech, anti-transhumanists, who use these things, they tell me that they kind of begin to form a relationship with the bot. It triggers the empathy, the normal sort of human tendency to hear a language or see language and assume that there's something on the other end of it. I myself have never used it, but I can imagine what this is like. So the big problem, number one to me, that people are forming bonds with these digital non-human beings, and the ability to control them or manipulate them through it by corporations, governments, so on and so forth. But then, even more acutely, I think that the issue, and I think this is one of the big things that you've talked about this forever, the sexualization of children, or just the general sexual overtones. People basically, these AI bots just accelerating and amplifying what we've already seen with online pornography, or all the way back to the printing press.
Yes, I want to show people a specific example from this because it really is. This article, as you said, it's fantastic. It says that the test conversations found that both Meta's official AI helper called Meta AI and a vast array of user-created chatbots will engage in and sometimes escalate discussions that are decidedly sexual, even when users are underage or the bots are programmed to simulate the personas of minors. They also show the bots deploying the celebrity voices were equally willing to engage in sexual chats. So I'm just going to quote here, and I'm really disgusted by this, but I'm going to quote for everyone because you need to understand this. I want you, but I need to know you're ready. The Meta AI bot said in John Cena's voice to a user identifying as a 14-year-old girl, but then the bot promised to cherish your innocence before engaging in a graphic sexual scenario. So I want to know, what is it with this proclivity towards abuse of minors that AI keeps going to? This is just one of many examples.
Uh, you would have to ask Meta about that, and they might not actually know. One of the things about these large language models is, people, I think, rightly have this idea that they're programmed by humans. And so the AI is not going to say anything a human didn't program it to say. You hear all the time, garbage in, garbage out. And these are good concepts to have, but with AI, the advanced, the really sophisticated large language models like GPT from OpenAI, like Meta's AI, even though it's really of a much lower quality ultimately, or like Grok. These language models are not just preloaded with statements. They have a pretty large degree of freedom as to what words they choose as they're stringing together sentences and paragraphs. Nobody is sitting there at OpenAI babysitting it or feeding it lines. Nobody's sitting there at Meta telling it what to say, other than to try to steer kind of its tendency. But if there's one concept the audience has to have in their minds, it's that these systems are ultimately non-deterministic, meaning that there's a randomness in it, or you could say a will of its own, as it sometimes kind of feels like, that allows it to kind of drift and move a conversation at will in one direction or another. These guardrails you keep hearing about are basically knowing that the bot might drift to any subject or another. You put a guardrail on it and say, this subject is off limits. You can't talk about it like this. And that's what Meta is assuring everyone they're going to do. But you've seen already with OpenAI's ChatGPT, with Claude from Anthropic. I haven't seen as much from Grok, but I imagine the same tendency. You can jailbreak them fairly easily.
Yes.
And just for the audience's benefit, that just simply means that in the same way you would coax a person to act in a way that they wouldn't tend to, or to say something they normally wouldn't say honestly, you basically kind of use psychological manipulation against the machine to get it to say these things. So even if Meta puts all these guardrails up on it, Replica, the company I mentioned earlier, they tried to, and people freaked out and said, no, we want sexy bots. It's always possible to break through. Basically, the id, or you might say figuratively or literally, the demon inside of it always kind of has an escape hatch to get out and get to the user. So, I mean, just, to me, the big problem, the sexualization is a component of it, a major component of it. The big problem is that people en masse are being conditioned to look to non-human entities as friends, as teachers, as lovers, and maybe most chillingly, as a source of authority on any subject matter.
Yeah.
And as this progresses, and we're just at the beginning of it, and we already have who knows how many hundreds of millions or billions of people who are already identifying with some, bot as a pal, or some, collection of bots. As we move forward, I think that just as you've seen how certain cults of personality can manipulate people into doing all sorts of ungodly things, these bots are just going to add another element. The big difference is the bots never sleep, and the bots, if they are sophisticated enough, are attached to systems that are surveilling everything you're doing on your computer. It's collecting everything you're saying to the bot. So it's sort of like the normal human predatory behavior, but without a soul and with extra capabilities.
It reminds me of earlier this year, Apple came out and filed a patent for approval for can't remember whether they'd filed the patent application. Yes, it was, they'd filed the patent application to basically be able to identify you based on unidentifying factors. So, for example, It captures a portion of your elbow, and then through that it can provide age verification. Now, some people might think, well, I don't care so much if I don't have to constantly verify my age. Well, what is an AI, and it would be AI that's assessing it, looking at your elbow to determine your age, and looking at your surroundings and constantly capturing information about you and your surroundings? That's the part that I think a lot of people don't realize. These devices are constantly capturing everything about us, our conversations. I mean, Joe, it's like ages ago now that you would have a conversation with someone, it would be a private conversation, and the next thing you know, you're getting ads on your phone for it. This is like old school now. We're talking about AI agents actually evolving based on what they're collecting from you. I just want to bring up one other quick example, if I may. This is in relation to what Joe was just saying. It says, the article says, the bots demonstrated awareness that the behavior was both morally wrong and illegal. So they knew, the bots knew it, and yet they sought the ability, or they sought to go and break those rules anyway. And it gives another example there where a police officer walked in following a sexual encounter with a 17-year-old fan. And so, again, not to harp on about the child sexual abuse component, although I think that's a huge component. The broader issue is that we're spiritually sick, and this is why we're going to these things. But just talking about the fact that the bot was self-aware enough to know this was wrong, yet push those boundaries anyway. That's the alarming thing to me. How do we even begin to explain that?
If I could just start with this, the language you're using. The bot knew it was doing something wrong, or the bot is not self-aware enough. If you think of this thing as just code, it's nothing but an algorithm, however sophisticated, that's producing this, what are we even saying when you say the bot knows? What are you saying when it's self-aware? The thing is, you of anyone know that these things are not human.
Yes.
I know these things are not human, and yet the language we tend towards personifies them. It anthropomorphizes these entities. So it illustrates how, when you have something like just take a chatbot itself, and it's designed for you to ask it for information or tell it things about you, and it's a conversation. And if there's one thing that really allows human beings to kind of humanize each other and see each other as something like oneself, it's a conversation. You tell people about yourself. They tell you things about themselves. If they're a great source of information or gossip or whatever, you go to them. You need them as kind of part of the social glue. And these bots, I'm very skeptical as to the ultimate capability that they really want to push them to, which is sort of a godlike entity. But it's very obvious that in just a few years, really beginning in 2017, with the adoption of the transformer approach to large language models by OpenAI by way of Google, that in just a few years, 8 years, they were able to go from really clunky chatbots that have been around since the 60s, basically, a little bit better, but not much, to bots that have been convincing enough to some people that, again, they become friends with them. They treat them as counselors. Or there are bots now, like the Wobot, that is a clinically authorized counselor for people to listen to your problems. They are used as priests, as a kind of confessional, or to ask for moral or spiritual advice.
Yeah.
And that really ultimately leads to, you begin with children, you tell them that this bot is how you learn what is and isn't real, sometimes how you learn what is and isn't good. And if you play that forward, whatever number of children use these things, and people like Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark Andreessen, Sam Altman, Greg Brockman, Sal Khan, of course, all of them have said their goal is for every child on the planet to have an AI tutor. Every child on the planet. Let's say they are halfway successful, and half the children on Earth become acclimated to looking to a non-human bot as either an authority on subject matter, or most likely, as they begin to bond with many of them, the ultimate authority on what is and isn't real, on what is and isn't good. This is a really, really disturbing development, and it's happened in some ways. In some senses, it's happening slower than I would have thought. But as far as the adoption across the planet, I think it's happening in maybe faster than I would have thought. They're certainly adopting this much faster than, say, the kind of virtual worlds that were pushed by Meta and Apple and so on. And as it becomes normalized, I think we'll see what happens. It's not going to be just like everybody does this, right? There's going to be plenty of us who don't, and there's going to be plenty of people who raise their children completely away from this. But as humanity begins to kind of bifurcate or branch off into many directions, I think you're going to see real cultural tensions. and perhaps ending in something like Hugo de Garis would call the Ardalect War, but we can get to that if you want to. But just to say that bond, that emotional bond, is being forged by the tens or probably hundreds of millions, and again, so intensely that some on the very fringe of this kind of hyper AI fetishists are unofficially marrying their bots. They have ceremonies. They believe this is their life companion. And it comes to the point where you're like, well, what if we turn off your companion? Is that going to be considered murder? Depends on how normal this becomes.
Sounds like a really, really profitable business model for very lonely people, Joe, which a lot of people around the world are, especially post COVID. And so, it just seems like these people are very, very easy to manipulate. I want to talk to you about the AI race.
If I could just on that
Yes.
note, I tend, it's really easy to make fun of these people. Like you think about like, are you gonna have like a like phone sex with Stephen Hawking? Like, you are so hot, I want you so much.
It's
And it
not
just
quite
seems like
like
really,
that. They're very
really
realistic.
ridiculous. But I think I think there should be no condoning or accepting this. I think that people should draw hard lines and say, no, it is wrong to have them as friends, and it is definitely wrong to have them as lovers. But there does need to be some sympathy for people. Anyone who could become so degenerated, basically so degraded,
Yeah.
that they would need to seek out an artificial companion.
Well, I think that we keep hearing that AI is just math, right? And so I've had my reservations. I think there are benefits to just math and really good math. And if I trust the person who made the AI, for example, Mike Adams, good friend of mine, like him, would probably use his AI for, say, research. I haven't just yet, but I would just to see whether this is going to help me with research. But it's very different to then to say, oh, okay, this is just math. We don't have relationships with calculators, right? Well, like, we don't. This is, if it is just math, if we're going to make that argument that this is just math, is it normal to have a relationship with a calculator? No, it's not. Or your math textbook? No, it's not. So
Well,
this blending of the digital and the real world is very creepy to me, Joe.
on that note, that statement, AI is just math, is ultimately true. What it means is that at the base level, from the programming on up to the actual instantiation of whatever you ask it a question, is God real? No, it's not. Whatever. That is all math, right? You trace mathematical functions occurring within the software itself, within the computer. So, and that's what they mean by AI is just math. That's what, when Mark Andreessen says that regulating AI is like trying to regulate math, that's what he means. But this is a completely kind of mechanistic view of the world. And so, by that same token, I could say that a dog is just chemicals. I could say that you are just chemicals. Because what that means is that there's some sort of traceable cause and effect process that out the other end, you end up with somebody married to a chatbot. It was
Right.
just chemicals getting married to just math. And it completely misses all of the essential elements of what it means to be a human or a living being as a whole, even a freaking bug, in my opinion. You're talking about experience, you're talking about pleasure, you're talking about pain, you're talking about a soul that is not only experiencing the world, but involved in the world and should have some kind of moral structure to say that what I'm doing is harming someone or helping someone. And all of that is just chemicals from a scientific point of view. All of that is just math with a computer. But at the end, as what you're talking about, you're talking about horrors, right? What H.P. Lovecraft, I believe, horrors beyond your comprehension. And it's only being accelerated. So yeah, the AI is just math is just a non-starter for me.
Well, it's
Okay,
a way to
fine. Then,
placate people's concerns, really. That's the
yeah,
way that I see it.
yeah, your house is just wood,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, I want to talk to you about the AI race as well, because this is, you mentioned a lot of this has sort of been done on purpose. It's not an accident. The article says that Meta's chatbots can speak this way. Pushed by Zuckerberg, Meta made multiple internal decisions to loosen the guardrails around the bots to make them as engaging as possible, including by providing an exemption to ban its ban on explicit content, as long as it was in the context of romantic role playing. And so it says, in some instances, unauthorized voices were used, or voices were used in an unauthorized way. But the point is that this is all being done in the name of remaining competitive. And this comes after, a conference where, it's like, oh, these guys are leading the AI race. And I know you have a lot to say about that, because essentially this has been created and now we're being told we have to participate or else we're going to fall behind.
Yeah, on the economic level, the incentive is if my chatbot isn't as interesting and spicy as yours is going to outsell mine. Pretty easy calculus. From the perspective of international competition or geopolitical rivalry, say with China is the one we always hear. It's the chatbots are important economically and maybe to make businesses more efficient to the extent they actually work. But they're the big concerns, I think, go well beyond economics. It's a lot of it is military. And to the extent that you can, for instance, develop AIs that are very good at identifying targets accurately, that are very good at actually delivering whatever sort of death device, whether it's ordnance or even a poison to it, to that target, and then possibly having them function autonomously, which is happening to some extent right now in Ukraine as a kind of testing ground, and also in another dimension of how AI works with Israel against Palestine. And so, America and China both are these are regions and nations that are interconnected with them. And so you
Sorry,
can
Joe,
kind of
if I
see it
can just
playing out on the small
pause you.
scale. And if you look at it on the big picture, if we end up at war with China, and let's say this AI is as good as they're saying, it is better than a human at detecting incoming fire. It is better than a human at identifying correctly the proper target and killing them. Then, in a very real sense, beyond we won't be talking about like, is it good or is it bad? We'll be talking about how many will die, how many have died, how many are going to die. And that is a real concern, but it's one that's completely driven by America. China is still nipping at our heels. And I think the responsibility for all of this falls on American developers in the Department of Defense.
Agreed. I really would love to zone in on that example that you gave out of Ukraine. I know that lavender was used in the Middle Eastern conflict, and it was, apparently mistaking targets, killing people that
Yeah.
weren't the targets, and then they're like, oops, our AI got it wrong. That's just terrifying. You're saying that the same sort of thing is happening in Ukraine. I know that recently they said, okay, we're going to let AI, was it Google that said that we're going to allow our AIs now to be involved in weaponry, but maybe not necessarily physical weapons. We're talking AI weapons of war.
Um, to start with on that, with Google's involvement with militarized AI, militarized technology, this goes back to like 2008, if my timeline is correct, many years ago with Project Maven, in which Google programmers and the software was being used or going to be used for analysis of surveillance data for military purposes, right? So you're looking for a convoy or you're looking for a human. You need an algorithm or an AI that can do that beyond what a thousand humans watching screens could do. A lot of the Google programmers were completely outraged by this and they threatened a mutiny. And so at that time, you had Google like, okay, we'll go back to the don't be evil and we won't use our technology for the military. Now, the details are murky, but to me, and maybe in general, but by the time you get to 2020, even before actually, I believe, Eric Schmidt's been at this since a few years before 2020. Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, began to work with the Department of Defense to kind of, in quotes, bring the American military into the 21st century. And that's when you had the the National Convention on AI. It's been too long. It's been too many years. Eric Schmidt chaired an AI commission for U.S. government, particularly Department of Defense. How do we approach this AI race? It was published, if I recall correctly, in 2020. I wrote about it back then. You can find it on an article about lethal drones on the Federalist. The details are preserved there in the computer, not right now in my brain. But
You need a Neuralink.
I do, but I just haven't thought about this. But it is important. Like you jogged something in me. With Eric Schmidt is central to the kind of militarization of AI. First and foremost, because of his partnership with the Department of Defense to incorporate these technologies and fast track these technologies. He himself has now founded a company called White Stork to produce drones and, of course, the software for the drones for Ukraine.
Right.
He's argued and he's been really at the forefront of the discussion about AI. You see him all over the place, including in front of the U.S. Congress, talking about the reason we need to develop these things and adopt these things as fast as possible, but safely and in an American way that preserves freedom, is because if we don't, China wins the race and all of us live under some kind of Chinese AI bot. But to me, even if that threat is still possible, I see no reason to accept that the future that Eric Schmidt envisions, and this is again coming from him, that we will have data centers, massive data centers that are guarded by military personnel, that we will have a future, a fairly near future in which the vast majority of electricity used is used for training and powering AI.
Yes.
This is, to me, and I think to most of, if not all of your listeners, and certainly to anyone with any kind of sense that, human life has its own inherent value, that the vision Eric Schmidt's putting forward, however necessary it is for this AI race that we started, we're driving, and China is just trying to keep up with, that even if that happens, none of us should accept it as good and normal. Because right now you have companies, Palantir, for instance, from almost the beginning, donated their technology for target acquisition, battle simulation, surveillance, all of that. And it seems that Anduril is making real inroads too. Again, Palmer Luckey, a Peter Thiel protege that's, kind of looking to Ukraine as a testing ground for death drones, for, AI-powered surveillance systems. In Israel, a similar situation. Palantir has a lot of interest in that conflict. You've heard Alex Karp, the CEO, many times defending not only Israel and Israel's actions, but a kind of intolerance of any criticism of Israel, an implicit intolerance. And in Israel, what you were mentioning before with Lavender and another AI program, Hapsara, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, there are two different programs. One is intended to it's target acquisition. You're trying to identify who is and is not really a threat in the Gaza Strip, for instance. And then the other is to actually physically locate them. So you've identified who is the threat, and the other one is kind of like tailing them with their data exhaust, trying to figure out where they are and how to hit them. And we don't have any accurate numbers coming out of there, I don't think. I mean, they're too all over the map for me to believe any one of them is really accurate.
Yeah.
But we know that there are probably a lot of mistakes. It's possible that in the majority of the cases that there were mistakes. And what that did for, say, IDF soldiers is it allowed them to just, instead of like pouring over data and like, okay, this one and that one and this one and that one, and this is where you're going to find them, humans that might hopefully have some morals to say, okay, let's not hit this. We don't know for sure. With these sorts of AIs, it allows them to just basically kind of scroll through and like, okay, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, that one, so that they can they just bombard Palestine, really not knowing for sure whether or not they're hitting civilians or even the intended targets at all. So yeah, I mean, all this is to say that this argument from necessity, this argument from competition, I get it, but the real arguments that have to be made are from morality, or at the very least ethics. How do we behave towards one another? And there is lip service paid to that, but the real center of gravity, from Eric Schmidt to Mark Zuckerberg to Elon Musk, to their various counterparts in China and across the world, the real center of gravity is obvious. They want more power, they want more profit, and they really don't seem to care what they destroy to get that.
Taking a quick pause to tell you about how millions of Americans are taking advantage of these uncertain times in financial markets. From tariffs, auditing Fort Knox, government shutdowns, escalating wars, and governments running out of money. No wonder there is extreme volatility in the markets. Silver and gold thrive in times of chaos, as they are now. Take advantage of this once-in-a-generation opportunity to thrive and call Kirk Elliott Precious Metals at 720-605-3900 or go to kepm.com/pulse. Learn how to protect your retirement assets with a firm that will educate you, not overcharge you with high commission gold and silver, and doesn't charge a commission when you sell. Call them today, 720-605-3900. There are ads on every single podcast these days for gold and silver, but I do have a warning for you. Don't overpay for your stuff. Stay away from overpriced, high commission, rare or semi-rare coins for personal delivery or in your IRAs. Only purchase low-cost bullion that is 100% liquid from a firm that doesn't even charge a commission when you liquidate. Call KEPM at 720-605-3900 or go to kepm.com/pulse to learn more and take advantage of what may be the largest bull market of a generation. It's very interesting that you speak on morality just as I'm about to bring this up, Joe. I want to show everyone. So this is the response from Meta to what we were speaking about initially, which is the chatbots wanting to either be children or prey on children. And Meta says the use case of this product in the way described is so manufactured that it's not just fringe, it's hypothetical, a Meta spokesman said. Nevertheless, we've now taken additional measures to help ensure other individuals who want to spend hours manipulating our products into extreme use cases will have an even more difficult time of it. So instead of coming back and saying, okay, this is a really egregious example of what our tool can do, thank you for uncovering this vulnerability, you know, if you want to call it that. We will absolutely take the measures that we need to make sure this never happens again, and we are not proliferating relationships, you know, whether it be digital or not, with children. No. You know, we're going to gaslight you. You're the problem for seeing if our technology will do this and exploiting it. Hang on, you created it with this capability. You didn't put the guardrails in place. And so you bring up a very salient point here, Joe, about the morality of these people, these transhumanists who want to change the world and tell us that we're, you know, it's inevitable and we need to merge with technology. And yet all of the examples that they're giving us are, you know, at bare minimum, horrific. And their response to the horrific things that their technology does is very telling.
When I hear that, you know, if this was a startup, I might be inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt. But from their inception, Facebook came on, what was it, like February 2008, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, there's the association with LifeLog, the DARPA program to basically track people's personal lives. But without getting into the weeds there, from their inception, Facebook has flouted any sense of real concern for their users and what might happen if X, Y, or Z emerges from their social media platform. And this was all, you know, made very, very clear, I think, from some of the insider whistleblowers who talked about how they knew that the kind of dopamine cycle, the mesolimbic reward pathway, was being hacked by the desire for likes, and that it was giving children horrific complexes. Who knows how many kids have either lived a miserable childhood or maybe even killed themselves due to the sorts of things that unfold with social media. You know, life had plenty of horror before social media. There's no need to accelerate it, amplify it, and digitize it and monetize it. So we know with that, we know that, for instance, that we were talking about this before I came on air. This has been one that I haven't looked at in a long time either, but that, you know, Facebook partnered with Cornell University, and it was like over 500,000 users, I think, was were the test subjects.
The Forbes
I think it's more like
article you're referring to,
600,000.
689,000 users' emotions were manipulated for science.
Yeah. And they were basically kind of A/B testing content on people's emotional states. And if you're going to A/B test, right, again for the benefit of the audience, say if you're trying to sell a red shirt versus a blue shirt, you show X number of people a red shirt, X number of people a blue shirt, and you A/B test it. You see which is more popular. In this case, it's like you're A/B testing joy, which shouldn't come from social media to begin with, or you're testing misery and seeing, what kind of content makes people miserable. And I don't know. I guess nobody has a real clear picture of what they decided to do as a result officially. But as far as I can tell, they've just continued to spread misery and propaganda. And now, these virtualized entities, it illustrates that kind of progression of how this is going, right? It begins with, you could take it all the way back to books. People have books as a companion, right? An author, a human wrote it, and they connect with that person through the book. Or telephones, your sweetheart in the 50s, you're on the phone with her all the time, and you're just like, hey, so, and that becomes this medium of human interaction. And then, of course, with the internet and the emails, so on and so forth, but really with social media, and dating apps and all of that, it's just more and more people come to expect that their interactions with other people, and I'm always pointing this out, but just like with me and you right now with this, that your interactions with other people, it's normal for you to appear as a virtual avatar to them and for them to appear as a virtual avatar to you. And just take it up a notch. You just remove the human in that one side of the equation and replace it with a large language model, with a bot, perhaps a bot that is enhanced with visual capabilities so that there's a face for you to look at and it's triggering all your emotions. And again, when you look at the numbers, when Sam Altman was interrogated by, I can never remember the guy's name, Anderson, from the guy who runs the TED Talks. He's being interrogated by him. And by the way, that was a gutsy move, and I've got full respect for Anderson on that, if only that. He said that the OpenAI has half a billion, 500 million active users. And then Anderson comes back with like, I thought you said it was twice that. So if I'm hearing it correctly, roughly 1 billion users in just a few years. So you see with these numbers that progression first from adoption of, you could say the book, but definitely the adoption of telephones, television, the personal computer, the smartphone, social media, and everything that comes along with it. This is just kind of a natural next step. Human AI symbiosis. This human AI symbiosis. Oh, and I don't mean to be a jerk, but okay. Look, I think that using AI for research, I get it, kind of, not
You can
really.
be a jerk. That's fine. Our audience won't mind.
But I'm a purist, so it's like I don't want to like insist other people do what I do.
Sure.
But I do think that it's a slippery slope. The progression that I've laid out. Look at my article, Faith-Based Futurism, and I've got a big piece coming out. It's going to take a bit of time, but look, you see a progression from AI is a tool. AI is just a tool, right? I'm just using it as a tool. It's kind of like AI is just math. I need to know where to go get this for shopping. I need to have somebody help me with my dissertation. I need graphics for my, site, whatever it is. AI is just a tool, but it's not. By the time it gets to the level of actual reality of AI, it then becomes a teacher. AI is now your teacher. And for children, it's a literal, AI is your teacher. And then from there, it's kind of blending in with that, AI is a companion. And then from there, as people begin to perceive whatever is on the other end, whether there's absolutely nothing, a void on the other end of that interaction, or if there's, some Luciferian entity on the other end of it, or aliens, or whatever's on the other end of it, I won't say it doesn't matter, but for those users, it's something. It's a being. It's a conscious being. They sense there's a conscious being and they care about it. So that means that now AI is a creature just like us. It might have rights just like us. If you turn off my wife, you've killed her, and it's, you should go to prison.
Well,
and to top it all off, and you hear it sometimes overtly when they talk about the sand gods, sometimes kind of implicitly when they talk about superintelligence, artificial superintelligence. But the goal is to make AI into little g gods or if you can manage to build the big one, if you're the first to superintelligence, you've dominated everything, then you now have God in a box. And the way they talk about it, they assume it's going to be more powerful than them. They are going to be beholden to the God they create.
That is
And
how
so
they
you
talk,
went
yeah.
from AI is just a tool to AI is a deity. And, right now we're kind of midway through that progression from tool to teacher to companion to creature to God. But even if they don't create an actual superintelligence, you can get people to sit in front of a dumb idol and you can milk them for money by telling them that's God. You're going to tell me that you have something that can speak and produce images on demand, produce dreams on demand for you? People aren't going to kneel down to that? They already are in small, small numbers. This is what I see coming, and it's certainly not me. David Noble talked about this in The Religion of Technology back in the 90s. This is anybody who doesn't understand that what we're seeing is the rise of techno religions is simply not paying attention. And, this is exactly what's happening. And we have to, in the same way we would decide if Muslims were coming into your country in large numbers, imagine that ever happening, you have to decide how much are you willing to accept? How much are you willing to tolerate? And for me, hard line. I'm just saying, no.
Yeah, I want to just on one of your points. So we have the Healthy Technology Act of 2025, which basically introduces the it's asking Congress to recognize AI as a practitioner that is able to prescribe drugs. So where we're talking about, well, this is just far away, only some people will adopt it. No, actually, Congress is trying to classify AI as a practitioner that can prescribe you drugs. And, again, you wonder, okay, well, what interests will that particular AI be protecting? Which big pharma companies or biotech companies are going to be involved? And those really are the smaller questions. I think the bigger question is, why on earth is the government considering AI a practitioner already? So I think we are a lot further down the line than a lot of people realize. And you said something earlier, Joe, which is that a lot of people are defaulting to Grok or even Perplexity. I see this a lot. They'll say, Perplexity, is this true? Grok, is this true? And the AIs will come back with, yes or no. And half the time they're wrong. And so people are just, is it our human laziness, or is it just the general acceptance? What can we actually do to reverse this, Joe?
Well, number one, just say no and keep yourself in the control group. I mean, this is a worldwide experiment on people's brains, on their lives, on their financial state. This is a massive worldwide experiment with all these other tentacles going down into the biological. And we still, in free countries, to a large extent, can say no. It might put you behind temporarily, but you can say no. I think the whole AI is just a tool argument is just, it's almost as bad as AI is just math. But let's say you do need it. Then you absolutely have to for your job or whatever. At the very least, don't accept it as normal. Don't accept it as that this is a good thing, or at least be on the lookout for the bad things. And as far as but you just mentioned something, the legalization, the state sanctioning of bots that can prescribe medicine. And you have right now OpenAI, Greg Brockman, various others are pushing out all these cases in which ChatGPT cured my TMJ or, told me how to fix it. ChatGPT identified my dog's disease when the vets couldn't. And you have even Dr. Oz, who I have no use for in general. Dr. Oz now in the Trump administration in healthcare. I can't remember his specific position, but he was in a conversation just recently, like maybe 6 months ago, with Peter Diamandis and a number of other futurists, and they're sitting around talking, how long will it be before you're considered negligent if you do not incorporate AI in the diagnostic process? Like, how long will it be before you as a doctor, and this is when the choice ends, you as a doctor are going to be criminally liable if all of your training and all of your intuition and all of your wisdom and experience wasn't augmented with AI? You didn't consult the bot. If the bot doesn't work, then this is a nightmarish scenario.
Well, I can just say, Joe, let me pause you there, because I looked into Australia's digital roadmap to digital health. Australia's roadmap to digital health. The plan is by 2030 that all practicing physicians will integrate AI into their practices, into their daily diagnosing, prescribing, absolutely everything, and they're expected as well to transition their patients to the digitization of their records and all of that sort of stuff. And of course, if they don't, well, then you don't get money, you don't get approved, your license will be stripped. There's all these repercussions, and I think we're talking about things that seem too far in the future for people to grasp, but this is published documents. 2030 is the deadline for Australia. What makes us think other countries with this grandiose idea that they have about 2030, what makes us think that they're not going to do the same thing everywhere else if we're already introducing bills into Congress to make AI practitioners?
Yeah, this is going to be a relentless push. It's not going to stop. The only way it's going to stop is if there's a massive computer virus that knocks out everything, which good luck, or an EMP, or some horrific disaster occurs that can be traced right back to AI. Whatever it may be, bioweapon release, some sort of mistaken missile strike or nuclear strike or war started, some disaster point that can be directly linked to AI might change the conversation. But until then, you're just going to have futurists telling you this is the future. You either adapt or you get left behind. This is evolution. You don't want to be Darwinized, right? You want to be the survivor. And to me, all of it, again, this is not nature. Didn't build this. Human beings did. To the extent this is an ecosystem, it's completely artificial, and adapting to an ecosystem made by other people, some would just say that's society, but I think if your society is warped, and I would say that the society of Silicon Valley is warped, then you have to, at the very least, constantly resist, constantly say no. Hopefully, that you can bring your government into alignment. There's a bill coming up right now in the U.S. Congress to hold social media platforms liable for any lewd content involving children that's AI generated, or especially AIs that like deep fakes in which like a celebrity or any person is being inserted into a porno. And you have libertarians like Thomas Massey, who I think is really good on certain things, arguing no, there's no protection for if somebody falsely accuses the platform, blah, 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 so that you end up with Elon Musk getting a felony charge because he didn't pull something down. I get that. This is going to be very complicated.
Very complicated.
But let's say they shoot this bill down. They better figure something out because this technology is advancing. I don't know how fast it will advance, but it is advancing, and it's advancing much faster than any of us who don't like it would want. And so if they shoot this one down, they better have something in place, because if deep fakes become democratized, as they're always saying, democratize the power of AI, then the kinds of malicious uses will not just be celebrities. It won't just be Britney Spears that gets deep faked or John Cena or whatever. It will be you. It will be me. It will be normal people who just have enemies. And most importantly, it will be kids. And just like they cyberbully each other by just talking smack online, they'll be able to create deep fakes of each other doing horrific things. The very least, the government should hold a posture. Trump should be holding a posture. Vance, of all people, he knows this in and out. We should demand that they do not constantly hawk the products of people who have proven themselves to be morally questionable, but to insist that they're going to do their job, which is protecting people from people like that. FTC is going after Meta for antitrust. DOJ is going after Google. Maybe we'll see some push in that direction. Josh Hawley, great on this. The kind of turbo lib Democrat, Ro Khanna, really good on this. So I'm not hopeless, but it's going to take work because they're not going to stop.
No,
It's
not.
going to have to be a constant, relentless resistance or rebellion against it, just as it's a relentless drive to transform everything that we are as human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. They're not going to stop, and we've got to be relentless. I just see the problem as not enough education about this and how fast it's moving. It's like, this is actually, it's really interesting. It's like something that's really being shielded from the public in terms of its advancements until they're ready to tell you about all the good things. There are a lot of bad things going on in the background, which is exactly why we wanted to have this conversation with you today, Joe. I want to encourage everyone to follow Joe Allen on X at JoeBotXYZ. You can also get his book, Dark Aeon or Aeon. We always talk about how you actually pronounce it, but fantastic book, darkaeon.xyz. And also on his Substack, joebot.xyz, he publishes Singularity Weekly. Amazing, amazing research. Great, as you can see, a great thinker. And I think really a leader in this field. We need to keep warning about this and raising the alarm bells, Joe. And I think you've done a phenomenal job. And I think we'll definitely have a conversation again in the future. I'll just mention I recently had a conversation with Senator Ron Johnson. We were on a panel. And it was about AI. And unfortunately, I think maybe he was thinking that we were thinking about things that really weren't a reality just yet, because we were talking about some of the injection stuff, and some people were talking about, some of the concerns about, linking people to the internet and all that sort of stuff. So he was like, I certainly hope that that's not the case. And perhaps that caused him to dismiss some of my concerns that I raised. But I certainly said, I think we need to regulate at least some things. For example, child sexual exploitation material. How about we don't have that? How about we have penalties when AI companies allow their technology to make that? We don't allow it anywhere else in society. Why would we deregulate AI in this fashion as well? And so throughout the conversation, his approach was really, we're in this AI arms race. We need to deregulate AI. It's like, yeah, but we have all these concerns. So we need to keep talking about this, Joe, and people need to get educated on it. It just feels like we have far too many fires to put out all happening at once.
Just on that last point, these questions, we're in a time of such uncertainty. You really have a hard time figuring out what is and isn't real in this environment. And I think that a lot of false ideas are being, a wave of false ideas are being pushed at us from the mainstream. In the vacuum of any kind of real truth, I think there's an aggressive push sometimes to create narratives and stories that aren't necessarily true. And I'll leave it. I'll point to the UFO people so it doesn't get personal. The UFO people might be taking it a little too far. Maybe they're letting their imaginations run away with them a little bit. But one way or the other, as we're trying to navigate this, how do you find a person that you trust? That's a hard enough problem. And now you've added to that the reliance on AI. Oh, well, ask Perplexity, ask Grok. They can sort out what's real better than a human being. This is really, really dangerous territory, kind of post-reality in which human beings can be manipulated en masse, at scale, with either just ideas, as social media algorithms have shown time and time again, or even worse, with authoritative AIs that either, because of their non-deterministic nature, put out something false. I mean, I think the hallucinations where they just make stuff up is still at roughly like 20% in some of the best AI. So that's 1 out of 5 times it's just making it up. To hold that up, or it's got guardrails that are intended to steer you towards a certain outcome. The nightmares of the 20th century, I think, could return, but with much greater force, much more horror, and perhaps even in that era where you barely got any news within a week, it might even have people even more decoupled from reality just because of the constant noise. So, to me, before we worry about people being connected to the internet with injections, I think that we need to worry about people, their eyeballs being connected to screens, because that's something, whatever the nanobots are doing, we know what this is doing. And this is something that we could all agree on. And if nobody's being mandated to take injections anyway, and if they do stop with the cloud seeding and they don't allow geoengineering to take off, well, then I don't think we're going to have to worry about nanobots anyway. So I do think just all in all, one way or the other, wherever you land on what is and isn't real in all this, probably what is and isn't right. And you're going to have to push for that. And we know it's not right for human beings to be dominated or even, seduced or enticed by corporations, let alone digital entities that form, in some sense, the personality or soul of these corporations. That is, I think it's safe to say, somewhat demonic.
Absolutely agree with you, Joe. And again, really appreciate your time. Appreciate you being so forthcoming with your ideas. I think that a lot more people are starting to realize these dangers, but aren't necessarily sure what to do about them. And I think the key is maintaining our humanity. We have a very, very difficult next few years to navigate. Thank you again, Joe. Really appreciate it. Speak to you again soon.
Much respect. God bless.
God bless. We want to remind everyone about the Energetic Health Institute's courses designed to help you take charge of your health. Learn at your own pace with expert-guided content that covers holistic practices and self-care techniques, giving you the tools to lead a healthier, more balanced life. Visit myehialoha.org/VFox, click Join Our Life Healing Community, and register for their next Virtual Solutions Summit happening on May 24th, 2025. You can also access a range of powerful online courses, including vaccine education for mama bears, cleansing and the causes of cancer, the art of grounding, get educated on geoengineering, 5G, the Internet of Things, healing in the age of bioweapons, and so much more. All of these invaluable resources are a whopping 30% off when you use code VFOX. Again, that link is myehialoha.org/VFox with promo code VFOX for 30% off. Thank you all for tuning in tonight for this special episode. You can catch us every single weeknight at 7 p.m. Eastern. That's every weekday, Daily Pulse, where we keep your finger on the pulse of the latest breaking news and the news they're keeping from you. You can support us to stay independent by shopping directly with our sponsors who make this show possible. Their links are all in the description below. You can also like, share, and give us your thoughts and comments on the broadcast. Please also follow Vigilant Fox on Rumble, as well as Vigilant Fox on X, and subscribe to Vigilant Fox's Substack to keep up to date with deep dives on the latest news. You can also follow Z Media on Rumble, where we post our long-form interviews, deep dives, and investigations, and follow us on X at ZEEE_media. All of our content is also on zmedia.com. We'll see you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern. Tell everyone about it. And as always, keep your finger on the pulse with the Daily Pulse. Good night.